I'll call us into session tonight for our Tuesday, July 9th meeting. We have Dr. Shaw is absent, and we have a shorter crew this evening, smaller crew. Before we start, I just wanted to wish Pablo a happy birthday.
Happy birthday,
I'm 24 again.
But on to official business. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Dr. Davis, can you remind us of our overarching result?
Yes, our overarching result for the school district of Shorewood is our students are leaders who challenge themselves to grow and achieve academically, pursue their passions, navigate change, learn continuously, and contribute to the common good.
Perfect. And awards and recognitions?
So a couple tonight. One with athletics, and this is a follow-up. I know we had recognized the Booster Club golf outing before, but just wanted to announce that the second annual Greyhound Open Golf Outing raised over $15,000 for the athletic department that day. So I know the totals weren't in when we had recognized that before. So I just want to thank everybody again for coming out, and know that money goes to the athletic department and is critical for continuing our programming. So thanks for everyone that came out, and work on your game for next year, and we look forward to having more people out. Also wanted to recognize the start of our fiscal year started July 1st, which also started our new administrator contracts. So I just wanted to recognize we have our new directors are here with us tonight. So I just want to put a name to a face. So I have them stand up because they're in the back in the shadows. So Marta Kwiatkowski is our new director of business services and HR. So Julie Harris, our director of student services and special education. Sam Coleman, our director for equity. And so those are our directors that started, and then of course we had Ebony Grice, who began her term as the Atwater principal also. So just want to welcome them to the district, and we had a great retreat last week to get things started, and we'll look forward to hearing a lot more from them coming up. So that concludes the recognitions for tonight.
Perfect. We have our first public comment period. Anyone sign up? No? Okay. We'll move on. District operations, we'll do first our facilities design update.
Yes, so continuing to meet on a regular basis with the district management team to work on our design process with EUA and Myron. So some updates from the last couple of weeks. We met with the North Shore Fire Department and the village building inspector to talk through the areas that are going to be under heavy renovation and remodeling for our projects being designed. That allows us just to stay ahead of regulations and look at any hot spots that might come up in the design process before we get to some final designs this fall. So we're able to clarify some questions around some student storage in hallways at the elementary schools, and also some smoke doors and fire alarm issues that may be part of the design process in some of our remodeling. So that was good, and we appreciate the cooperation from the North Shore Fire Department and the village building inspector. So thank you for your time. Also have done walkthroughs with the principals, with EUA and Myron also for looking at the scope of capital maintenance work. So that work is defined as ceiling replacements, casework refurbishments, door replacements, painting, and flooring. So in many of the buildings we had a percentage designated that we weren't going to necessarily replace all doors, but it was certain doors. So we wanted to make sure that we're getting to the point where we need to get really specific, get out site maps and do a walk. When we had a percentage of ceiling tiles, we had a certain amount of money that was designated for that. So what were the areas that are the most needed? So the principals were able to walk through with custodians and Myron and EUA to do those walkthroughs. Those were concluded this week, actually. We had our last walkthrough at Atwater on Monday. So those are completed, and again, as we get to the design process, it allows us to begin to really put some specifics into our projects. And then as we're also in the process, as we get better designs, also able to refine our budgeting process so as we're moving forward. So So we had that go on the last couple of weeks. Just a reminder that at our next board meeting, which will be August 13th, so we don't have a second board meeting in July. Our next board meeting, EUA will be here to give some presentation, some feedback on the community design workshop that we had earlier in the summer, and how that influenced the design and renovations, in case anybody had any questions about that, and then to just give an idea of where we're at in the design process and the updates on that. Today I also met with, had 2 meetings on facilities, one with the technology team. So we had Mickey and Jack and James walking through with Myron and EUA, looking at the technology part, which includes a lot of safety and security issues with electronic door locks and such things, and also just looking at technology in classrooms, outlets, like those types of things. So, so again, refining that. Some of those estimates were done a year and a half, 2 years ago. So again, we're refining those as we can update our technology plan and get some more definitive numbers as we're moving forward on that. So those will be those are in progress. And then also had a meeting with Marta and Myron and EUA just to get Marta up to speed on 3.5 years of work in about 2 hours. So I think it went really well. She's gonna get a big binder of things and was able to ask a lot of questions. The good thing is through Marta's experience in previous referenda, you know, she understands how the process works. There's always some nuances, so just getting her up to speed. So we had a successful meeting this afternoon, and so we continue to roll forward. So again, you'll hear from Myron and EUA on August 13th at our next meeting. So.
Can I just ask, Brian, have there been any surprises with the walkthroughs with the principals, things that we hadn't anticipated or that, you know, were kind of out of left field?
No, and it's really, I think all of kind of the hotspots were identified before. I think one of the things that we're looking at, again, when it comes to like 30% of the replacement of ceiling tiles, is just making sure we're on the same page of what's where. I know there was a conversation about like the walls. Remember at Atwater we have some walls for some storage areas in the back, and so I believe one of those has a mural on it, so we want to make sure, so we're tagging those historic murals that were WPA murals, and making sure that that doesn't, you know, come down, or that wall doesn't come down, or we have a plan for the restoration of those murals. So those are just the little things that, again, we're getting into some of those details. There wasn't anything surprising that came up, but we're just making sure that Tony and the principal and the head custodian and Myron and EUA are all on the same page. So when we start swinging hammers, we know exactly what's going on.
Okay.
So.
And then in terms of looking at the casework, many of those are like leaded glass cabinets, or are we, that's part of the discussion?
Yeah, it's part of the
preserving.
Yeah, it's part of the preservation discussion as we're looking at that. We have a certain amount of money kind of set for that casework. So so really, and it's a case by case basis. I guess not to plan words, but it's case by case, classroom by classroom, because some of them are in good shape, don't need to be touched. Some are, boy, it'd be you know, difficult to save them, restore them. So yeah, so we're having those conversations as we look through that.
Mm-hmm. And then for the time being, you're just looking at which doors you're going to replace on classrooms, not necessarily all of them.
Correct. Yeah, being very specific.
Okay.
A lot of that has to do with ADA accessibility, and some of that is just changing out the hardware in the door, maybe not the entire door. In some cases, we have doors that do have some historical significance. You know, they're old doors, they're nice doors, and so we want to be able to preserve those if possible, but then also want to make sure that we're you know, being practical in the process.
And then in terms of safety and security, you know, looking at doors that can lock from the inside, not the outside.
Yeah.
Those types of issues.
Yep.
We're talking about school safety.
Yeah, so looking at that, also looking at electronic strikes on some doors, both exterior doors and interior doors, as we look at the amount of money, doing some analysis on the amount of money that we spend on keys, for example, and is there newer technology that can help us, you know, with our badges, you know, are there ways to be able to save some money on that? So just really taking a hard look at all of that stuff right now, and now that we can identify kind of exactly which doors we're talking about, and we can do some comparisons on through the bidding process and what vendors are out there, excuse me, and make some decisions on that moving forward.
Okay.
about what the tech team was looking at and what that discussion was about? Because I was trying to remember our last update on the technology plan. Are we referencing an existing technology plan? How?
So a lot of that, excuse me, a lot of that is infrastructure. So when we're looking at wireless access points, looking at fiber between buildings, looking at security cameras, looking at number of outlets in rooms, like that type of thing, is what primarily we're looking at from the kind of the technology plan per se that Mickey has put together. That's a lot of what we're looking at out of our operational budget and what he would have out of his budget year to year to be able to have a sustainable plan. What we didn't want to do is be able to purchase a bunch of computers necessarily out of the referendum and have that financed for 24 years and have them be operable for 5. And so this is really a move to kind of set up the infrastructure, so whatever devices that we have now and into the future, they can be as functional as possible.
I guess what I had in mind was I was wondering if, for instance, if we have a scenario where we're envisioning a classroom where students have individual devices versus one where everyone's referencing one screen, that seems like it would affect renovations of classrooms or furniture kind of choices. Are those conversations happening later or just in a different setting?
No, so that was part of our conversation today. And we're certainly also following up with staff on that, but we really want both, right? We want to be able to have, if students are doing activities where devices are important to have, we want to make sure that we've got the bandwidth and capacity through access points to be able to have kids have wireless access and be mobile. But we also know that sometimes you need to stand and deliver content, and we need to be focused on one screen or 2 screens in a room. So we want to be able to have that capacity also. So it's really trying to be, I think flexibility was probably one of the key words, as flexible as possible, and building the infrastructure so we're not stuck necessarily in one design, if you will. And again, not knowing what 10 years out is going to bring, but knowing that, in 5 years, we want to be able to we'll likely have more devices for students to have access to, and we want that flexibility.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our superintendent's action agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so I'd like to invite up Brad Lichtenstein and his team, along with Tim Kenny and LeVar Ridgway, to have some conversations around the Messwood football documentary. And so this is a conversation that began in the spring. So this is a project that really we have enough. Should have enough time.
We need one more chair.
Oh, I need one more. Okay. Yeah. So this is a documentary project at the high school. One of the things I want to be really clear about is that this is a separate project from a documentary that was talked about earlier in the year, that was focused a little bit more on kind of race in schools, that type of thing. That this project is totally separate from that project, and is focused on the Messwood football team. And if you read the pack and the information, you'll see really focused on mentoring, focused on the ability of a football team and a program and a culture to be able to foster young boys into men, and the responsibilities and the mentorship that comes with that. And that's really what the focus of this project is. So I just wanted to make sure that you, one, from a public standpoint, that we were clear that there isn't a connection between the previous project and this project. One of the things that was really important from my standpoint, and I'll have Tim and LeVar talk about some of their conversations too, was that this was something that had no bearing and influence at all on the school day. And so what we've made up in the agreement and have with Brad is that there will not be any cameras or any work that's done on this project during the school hours on school grounds. And so that's very clear. We wanted to make sure that that boundary was really clear. There's a lot of sensitivity from a staff standpoint around the previous documentary's work and the idea that cameras would be in the classrooms or in the hallways. And so certainly to respect that boundary, one of the non-negotiables for this project being able to move forward on our campus was to make sure that it was outside of that school day and not disruptive to that school day. So that was something we were able to reach an agreement on, and really was something that was important to me as we're moving forward. So I just want to have Tim and LeVar talk a little bit about from their perspective, because they'll really be the point people from a school standpoint as the project is progressing, working through some of the details or concerns that come up. So
Should
Tim,
we just
maybe
do a quick introduction so you know who's sitting around the
Yeah.
table? Here.
That'd be great.
You know me and LeVar, but
We know
you
Brad.
probably know Brad.
I'm Brad, Lichtenstein, 371 Productions.
Hi, my name is Miela Patel. I'll be the coordinating producer on the documentary.
I'm Suzanne Sherva. I'm the line producer on the documentary.
And I'm Ruben Whitmore. I'm associate producer on the documentary.
Okay.
Welcome.
I don't have formal prepared comments, and Dr. Davis took a lot of what I was going to share with you. So just from a historical standpoint and from the chair that I'm sitting in, and some of the concerns that I had shared and have now been allayed by the group here, was the documentary that was shared back in December, the idea that was not met with much enthusiasm at all by the staff, and it was very emphatic that that was not something that was wanted at this point. And so we've moved forward with the shift into a totally new project, and just making clear that this isn't a pivot from the previous project. It's like we wiped the chalkboard clean, and it was a start over. In fact, there was a lot of feedback that the group that's sitting here received that kind of pointed in the direction of the football team and the unique story that it is. And so when Brad and team began having the conversations with the coaching staff, athletes' families, and started to meet with something that sounded good to a number of the people, then we had some additional conversations about it in April as a possibility of that moving forward. So at that time then, LeVar needed to finish the spring sports season, and I needed to close out the school year. So this team then continued with conversations with athletes, families, coaching staff, and then we met knowing that there was support for the synopsis that you have read there in your documents. And I would say that should that synopsis arrive to fruition, and I feel confident that it can, that I'd be excited to see a product, because that would certainly show a very important part of our school in a very positive light for some adults doing some amazing work for kids, and from some very resilient athletes growing into confident young men. So that'd be great. So one of my primary concerns, and I'm going to begin addressing that, is to get a communication out to the staff regarding this documentary, because I'm concerned that just hearing the word documentaries can flash people back to December and be like, wait a second, I thought we said no to that. And so it needs to be made clear that this is a very different project, and I'm going to do that and invite an avenue to share any concerns or questions back through to me and Brad, and just make it very transparent and try to address those as soon as we possibly can. What else am I missing?
Emily.
Well, Emily would be part of it too. She's just not sitting around the table.
Yes.
There's that. I'll be working primarily with Brad and Emily to address any of the concerns. But that I think is going to be the important piece, is to have that really open communication, and that understanding that that back in December, that desire to not have the cameras on campus during the school day. Let's not disrupt the school day. We are trying to run a school fair, so no cameras in the hallways, no cameras following kids in the classrooms, and just having respect for that, and those parameters are in place and agreed upon mutually, cooperatively by the group here, and assurances that that's going to be the case, and just working on establishing relationships will be an important part of it to continue with the trust building around what could be a very, very successful documentary experience. So, Laura, do you want to?
Yeah, kind of second what you're
saying, a lot of the things that I want to focus on is the positivity of the project that could be done once it's completed, and making sure that it was focused on that and not necessarily conflict or something, because we feel that the program that we have is something special. We don't want to ruin the relationships we have with Mesmer, and also some of the alumni and people that have wanted to come forward to tell their story about how this football program has helped them in their lives and some of the relationships they have built in the past. So hoping that we can focus on that and really show a positive story about the two schools in Milwaukee in general. So.
Great. Yeah, questions or?
First, an easy one. Have you already had this conversation with Mesmer, and have they already signed off on this?
So Mesmer has said they're following our lead.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So
People
that's
follow us?
We were
Cool.
all together for the conversation.
correct.
Yeah, we were all together
was
for
curious.
10.
Okay. And so a couple other questions. One, I just was hoping you kind of walk through a scenario. So I get that there's not filming during the school day, and then there'd be kind of advance warning for whatever filming is happening. So say that you're filming at a Friday football game, so after the school day, kind of can you walk me through kind of how that would look and kind of the steps? Some of those are laid out in this agreement, but just how that would roll.
Would you like to do that?
Sure. I mean, some of this I think, we'll have to work out together. But, generally there'll be signs posted that there's filming going on. People don't want to be filmed, they can let us know. We'll be focusing mostly on the game. So the way we'll be set up is having a camera probably over, wherever the team sidelines is. We're working out, and we'll work with LeVar and LeVar's counterpart Ken in the conference to figure out the best way that we can get really amazing shots of football, whether that's with a jib or a drone or whatever's allowable. And yeah, I mean, we'll have personal releases from people who are not in public places. So all the students that we follow, all the parents that we follow, all the staff, everybody will sign a personal release, and the language of that is something that covers the school districts and covers our partner participant and covers us.
And then I noticed there was like an advisory group or stakeholder committee. Can you talk a little bit about that? Or just, I thought that
Sure.
was a good idea.
That's something that we want to work with both administrations on, is to create, whether it becomes formal or informal, however, but we want to really make communication open. So we want to be available, and the stakeholder committee was an idea that came up, so we can make sure that lots of people are at the table for whatever conversations want to take place. And that can be around concerns, it can also be around opportunities. So, and we want lots of information flow. But the exact makeup of that, I would defer to Brian.
Yeah, and that's.
I think some.
Go ahead.
Is that all right? I think some of that is going to come from. Let's see what kind of response I get from the communication that I send out, because it's going to be very specific, and it's going to invite conversation certainly, and the opportunity to express any concerns, ask any questions, and we'll address those. So a stakeholder group might be a group of people interested when it comes to time to be viewing Rough Cut and things like that, to get a number of different perspectives on what we're seeing, to ensure that positivity that we're looking for in the story. So it might be at a later time.
Sure.
It might be earlier, depending on the response. We'll kind of figure that out as we go moving forward here.
And I could add, just in terms of communication, a couple of things that we've talked about, both with Superintendent Davis and also with LeVar and Tim, is making space available for people to visit with Emily and me or any of the team at any time. We will, I think we included actually in the agreement, all of our cell phones. So we want to just make ourselves as available and transparent as possible.
And then anybody who wants to share, I think just since we're all like on the record here, it'd be helpful just to hear kind of why you felt like this is an important story to share, and then what based on what you know already, from talking to the players and coaches, how this reflects on Shorewood. Like, what does it say about Shorewood and the district and the broader Milwaukee community?
Sure. I can certainly talk about it, but anybody can talk about it.
It's all about this. Did you do a lot of filming? You don't have to, but you know.
Do I need the?
Yeah, you
Yes.
should talk.
Yeah, because they record it for a live stream.
All right, once again, my name is Ruben Whitmore, and I'm a Milwaukee resident who's been fortunate enough to be a filmmaker since graduating from Vincent High School on the northwest side of Milwaukee. You know, my involvement is twofold. I was invited to be involved by Brad, but I've heard the story, and I have friends and family who've gone to Mesmer and Shorewood. So to me, the opportunity to make a story that defies the normal presentation of our city and has the opportunity to frame and tell narratives that oftentimes are overlooked, you know, that's relevant. And to be quite honest, hearing some of the stories of the young men and the coach and the parents involved, it's pretty amazing. And I could continue to elaborate just off of the little bit I know, but it struck me as a unique opportunity to give faces and stories to so often a sport that lacks perspectives beyond the typical male perspective of what football is. So that in and of itself is unique without anything else. Just hearing that there's a coach who cares and there's, you know, dads and moms who are doing things that defy a lot of the storylines that are often offered. It's amazing to me. So, I mean, that's the shortest version I can give you, but, you know, I hope that helps a little bit to
Okay.
all right, cool.
I'm happy to add. If you're go ahead.
And I'm Suzanne, I'm the line producer, which means I'm basically, if you think of a budget, each line, I'm in charge of the line. So contracts, budget, numbers, making sure everything's sealed up and signed, sealed, and delivered, and that we have a good presentation to participant, our production company, our producing partners. But I moved to Milwaukee 4 years ago. I didn't know anything about Milwaukee, but I love Milwaukee. I think it's a great place, a great city, a great community, and I'm fortunate that I have 2 grown children now. One son who played high school football in the South, in Atlanta, and that experience of being a mom of a high school football player, he was a changed person. We moved him from LA to Georgia as a high schooler, so we were not greeted with hugs and kisses by him. It was a hard move, but I would say the sports teams were really what pulled him through. And I love the idea of this story of, you know, young men. We follow their journey because of mentorship and because of what the sports program can bring to them. So that's why I was initially, when Brad told me about it, I was like, I totally got it as a story, partly because of my personal experience as a mom and having a son who, you know, it was really vital for him to be on a team. And I just really gravitated to this story. I actually have a big narrative background, and one of the films I worked on was Saving Private Ryan with Steven Spielberg, and that band of brothers feeling. I think I get that here too, so that's why I think it's a very positive story, and it's a good thing to get out there, a good message about these young men that's not often seen in the media.
Sorry, everybody wants to.
It's a microphone.
Hi again, my name is Miela Patel. My family and I immigrated to Milwaukee in the early 2000s, and product of MPS, elementary, middle, high school, went to UW Milwaukee, so Shorewood for a long time felt like a community of mine. As a former, recently retired speech and debate coach at Rufus King High School, I myself, along with other coaching staff, kind of implemented this idea of becoming a family. So it was slightly disappointing when I left. But what interested me in this particular project, outside of wanting to work with Brad again, who I interned with a few years ago, was instantly seeing this dynamic, this family dynamic that Coach Davis constantly brings from the few times that I've met him, that the remainder of his coaching staff brings. I've had cousins that have attended both Shorewood and Mesmer, respectively, not through Meswood, but each, loved both of their institutions and the families that they found within. So it's just a nice reminder of what I had with my students, and definitely an opportunity to highlight what a dynamic program this is and what this opportunity could mean not only for both schools but for Milwaukee County to shed a different light.
I'll just add that I think one of the best things about the story is that it's about what brings people together as opposed to what divides them. And in this country at this time, that feels like a very important story to tell. And we're also very lucky that Participant wants to be our partner on this. They're a company you might or might not know was founded by Jeff Skoll, who made his money in eBay, started this company with a mission to have film really be transformative and to work beyond just the release for change. And they're a company that only demands that you break even. They're not looking for profit. They like it when they make profit, but that's not the bottom line. The bottom line is really making sure that films are put to good work, which is very consistent with our mission. So for me, I feel like it's a great opportunity. And as you know, I'm a Shorewood parent too, and would like to tell a story that feels like it's shining our community in a more positive light.
My main two concerns when I first heard about this were the students involved and the parents. Do we have their support? And I'm glad to hear that we do, and that sounds like Mesmer's parents and students are all in too. So that's fantastic. And then my other concern was just the teaching staff and how we're going to address and eliminate, or possibly not eliminate, but reduce concerns that were raised prior. So thank you guys for being willing to work on that, and Tim and LeVar are continuing to have that conversation. And I know that as you move forward with that message to the teachers and staff and kind of just the broader community, because I think some people are like, yeah, ooh, cool, a documentary, and others are like, I don't want to be filmed and I don't want everything. So I really appreciate the approach that you guys are taking, and I think it's great. I think the program is so unique, and I know that we've seen just in the last year the leadership of the football team and the students on the football team, and so I think it's awesome to be able to spotlight that. So thank you. I'm just curious, how does that work moving at games, or do we have to take this to WIAA? Do they have to approve this as well, or is this just we're saying we're doing this and that's fair enough to record all those games and record the footage? How does that work?
So we would have to get approval from first our conference, Woodland Conference, when we play our conference games, and then also the WIA. Obviously, there's been cameras at football games before, whether it's for a TV station or any kind of thing like that. So just making sure we have the permission from them first before we move ahead.
Okay, so that's still forthcoming. That'll be done on a. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love the direction this is going in. But just a quick question for Tim, particularly, what kind of feedback do you expect from teachers, from staff, coming off this year? That I would echo, the concern shared.
I would expect it that staff's going to hear the word documentary, and there's going to be a little bit of a. So I need to be really clear in my communication and very inviting.
But they're doing a story.
Talk about what's that?
Maybe a story.
Tell a story
versus that word documentary. I mean, our teachers are very smart. They're going to see through that. But
yeah, I think I'm just going to be really upfront about it, and just
Right.
say, and just kind of take it back to that documentary that was discussed in December. That's not happening. It's not. It's over. We're not going there. So, and from moving forward from there, just as just what we've articulated tonight, and a lot of just being super transparent about it's going to be key, and just yeah. And I'll just take it on case by case basis, working with Brad and Emily.
Yeah.
Emily's just not at the table right now. Emily's part of the group, because Brad and Emily have been very willing. So I'll sit down with anybody who wants to talk about it, and see what it's going to be. So because largely it's kind of, so if I'm a teacher here at Shorewood High School, which I was, I teach my classes, and unless I go down to the football field necessarily, or if I go into a film room or something, I may never see a camera. It's possible, but not gonna, we're just gonna be like really clear about what it is that we're going to do. And I think just that with inviting the conversation is good. I feel really good about my staff, and that they can come to me if they have questions.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 3-0. Good
Thank
luck,
you.
guys. Okay. Excuse me. Moving on to our superintendent's consent agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move we adopt the consent agenda.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Seems weird with the three of us. Okay. 3-0.
All right.
Thank you to the team for the salary adjustments for our custodial secretary and aide staff and managers, and welcome to all of our new staff. I know we'll continually be having approval of new contracts.
Yep.
Excellent. All right, we're cruising through. Public comment number 2. Okay. Moving on to board governance, our facilities referendum update is our standing agenda item.
Anything to add beyond what Dr. Davis shared?
Not that I believe, and I feel bad that I missed the last meeting, which was when we had a communications meeting. So I believe there was a one-pager put on the last agenda. I don't believe that, excuse me, that we have another communication meeting scheduled for 2 weeks. And otherwise, I think what Dr. Davis presented is what we have.
Okay.
One thing I'd raised before that I'll just take a moment to call out is in terms of communication, I would like to know if we could get a price or just explore text updates that people could opt into. So for instance, if it was customizable, which would be ideal, people could opt in and just say, like, I want to know about construction happening in Atwater or meetings that concern, what's going to happen in Atwater, or I want to know anytime there's a rendering released or something like that. So in an ideal scenario, somebody could sort of choose like which topics appeal to them, and then, but at a baseline, like we could at least just push out a text with a link saying there's news about the facilities work and go here to learn more. That would be like the minimal, I guess, level. Because I think, particularly I'm thinking about in the summer, times like this, it's just not front of mind for people, and so they might think that nothing's happening or think that there is no communication. They might not scroll down on our website and see those updates that are there. So it'd be good to know, and then also to get clarity about work they see going on, with the tennis courts, like which project is that under, what budget's that coming from, so they know what is referendum work and what's not. That would be, I think, helpful.
I did have that on my
Cool.
things to talk about after
Thank
you reminded me of that. I'm curious if you know, Brian, if any of those things can be done through Infinite Campus, because people already get the notifications through Infinite Campus. So I'm wondering if there's a way to tailor it for
With text,
For-
with SMS.
for facilities.
Yeah,
things
that would be
specifically.
a good thing to bring back to the committee, and I know Caitlin and Ted can probably look at that. I would, from what I know from my use of Infinite Campus, I doubt if we could customize it to, like search for Atwater and only
Right.
get Atwater text. I know just because we do it, we certainly can push out text messages, emails, similar to like we do when school's closed or on other things. The text messages, I think, certainly could then have a link to something on the website to say, here's the latest update. So I know minimally we could do that. I would just want to make sure that that's synced up with what the communications
Right.
committee is working on, just to make sure that we're, being as efficient as possible
Yeah.
with that.
My mind goes to when construction's actually happening, and if it impacts like school drop-offs or pickups
Sure.
or doors and all those sort of things, that's the kind of thing I would want on a
Right.
text or something like that. So I think it's good to start thinking about that now and doing some figuring out what if
Right,
we can do it through
exactly.
Infinite Campus or if we need
Right.
to look at what it would be. So yes,
Yeah.
let me
Cool.
flesh
Thank
that
you.
out and we'll report back.
And I think there were a few conversations that we never, they're probably on Perry's list too, but a few kind of policy questions that we had up in the air as a board that I didn't want to lose sight of. So, one that pops to mind is just if we're going to adopt some kind of policy around supplier diversity and, women-owned businesses. And I guess that, in the same, if we want to look at adopting policy or operating expectations around, sustainability and materials, like it seems like it's almost, we're gonna get to a point where it's too late to have input into that kind of thing. And so if that's important to us, I think we should decide. Or if it's not, then, or if we want to say it has to be case by case, or we leave that to Brian, that should be a board conversation, I think. So I think at one point we had like our retreat, we had set some time, but our time ran over and we never sort of reconvened on that.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so that may be just a calendar item to check with Power on.
Yes. Future agenda item to talk about that. Yep.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you. Pablo, do you have a SWASA update?
I do. Started today at 7:30 in Brookfield, packed house. I got there even a little bit early and I couldn't find a seat. A lot of business managers at the SWASA, which stands for Southeastern Wisconsin School Alliance, which is comprised of typically superintendents and board representatives, but often business managers go. And this month there were more business managers than typically go to those meetings, largely around what's going on in Madison and kind of the uncertainty with the budget process. So we spoke about everything from special ed, the partial veto that Governor Evers kind of pushed back on the GOP budget that they gave him. So things, where the governor's proposed 30% special ed reimbursement and then 60% next year, whereas the GOP-controlled legislature has proposed sticking with the status quo, which is 26%, which is one of the lowest in the country, and then moving to 30%, and that's kind of significant. So that's something that's still there's just so much ambiguity, and we had State Representative Evan Goyke, who represents the west-north side of Milwaukee, come and kind of share an update and basically, inviting everyone to speak to their representatives. We have representatives, in David Bowe, State Rep David Bowen and Senator Taylor that are supportive of public education. They're not the ones we need to convince. So it's important for us to belong to associations like SWASA, where we can sit at the table with folks from Racine and Brookfield and other districts that can kind of leverage their support. There was concern with not a member of our group, but there was a school district, Nina, that their school board put out a letter to the governor and to state leaders saying this is okay. This $200 increase per pupil is okay, and it's not. And the Whitefish Bay superintendent spoke up against it. It's not adequate. So it's really hard when one member kind of peels off forum. One school district peels off. So it becomes very important for us to kind of stick to this increase that the GOP is proposing is not really an increase. It doesn't keep up with inflation. It doesn't keep up with the needs. So that was this morning. That was basically what we talked about for an hour and a half. Questions?
Obviously, things are still moving in Madison, but will we get a budget update as to how our placeholder numbers are faring?
Yeah, we can do that in August. I can work with Marta on that.
I mean, she's
Just
had a
as an
week
update.
going, no, I'm just kidding.
I know.
Yeah, this is day 7, so we'll give her a little bit more time. But,
Alright.
yeah, we can. We'll target August 13th, the first meeting. The second meeting is the annual meeting. So
Just maybe just a one-pager of
Yep.
we're on track or need to make adjustments.
yeah, and then an update on where Madison is at that point.
Right,
We may or may not know anymore, but
right. Great, thank you. And then you also have information for us on our teacher research
Yeah,
forum?
I think it was back on, June 14th, Friday, June 14th, I was able to go to Madison for the day. Actually made a weekend out of it. Actually, no, we were going to spend the night, we didn't, we came back that night. But went to the Teacher Action Research Forum that about 10 of our very dedicated teachers participated in, including Amy Miller, who is here in the audience, the president of the SEA, and got a chance to hear over the course of a couple hours, kind of in a roundtable format, teachers that had identified questions that they had and they wanted to tackle in their classrooms. Everything from engagement to increasing learning to connection to students. Everything from, the youngest kids to the oldest kids. I would say though, elementary and middle school were very well represented. And as I described at a previous meeting, this was taking, the SLOs, the student learning outcomes, the goals that teachers set at the beginning of the year, and this was just jacking it up like, it was times 100 what that these teachers were doing. And listening to them, you're listening to teachers that are working an incredible amount of hours and juggling a million different things, but then also taking the time to be scholars. And that was really powerful to hear their presentations. And I hate to isolate any of these because they were all very powerful. But everything from, the role of feedback on reading intervention to the music teacher at Atwater listening to her problematize how Eurocentric the field of music education was riveting, but then how she's countering that was even more exciting. For her to identify that as like, here's this disconnect. And then what she's doing to counter that was really remarkable. The ELL teacher, Roxanne Tibbetts, tackling gender equity and trying to normalize, decenter kind of dominant frameworks around gender, and helping students be more open and through access and through seeing other perspectives. So, Amy talked about exit tickets, can-do statements to strengthen student agency in math learning. I was there as a school board member, but then I was also there as a teacher going, stealing this idea, that idea. They were very grateful that I went, but I said to them, and I'll say it again, like, I got a lot out of going there. It was a professional development day for me as a teacher, so I appreciated it. And the person that they had been working with through UW-Madison apparently is moving to the DPI or has moved to the DPI, so I know that Tim Joint, who has been facilitating this work with the teachers, and kudos to you, but kudos to all the teachers as well. This was really, because after this year, going to that event was one of those moments where you're like, wow, this is a wonderful place to be. And to see the level of engagement from our teachers at that level. I mean, it was really,
How many
it was something special.
teachers total were like from around the state?
I want to say, from around the state, there were probably 30, but I think 10 of them were 13. So we were very well represented.
Sweet.
Yes, and which made it really difficult for me to hear every single one. So I was bouncing around. I did get to hear just about everybody present, but that was difficult because Shorewood really dominated. So 13 of the 30 or so were from here. And next year, ideally, and I know Tim is going to come at some point and with some of the teachers to present. This is something I would love to, anything we can do to support these types of initiatives. It was also, a deal was worked out where, the credits were reduced, not the credits were reduced, the cost for the credits were reduced so that this was accessible, for teachers. They were able to get, 3 graduate credits at still a hefty cost, but, a third of what they would be paying if they were taking a course directly through Madison or UWM. So things that we can do to offer more opportunities like that, the payback, and what we're going to see in the classroom, we've got some real teacher leaders that can help, as we talked about towards the end of the year, kind of be some of the leaders in PD, and that we can tap into to help one another. So kudos to Amy, her colleagues, and Tim for doing all this.
So, knowing that all those teachers are super busy, but is there any opportunity to have like all or some of those presentations? Either, I don't know what form, were they all talks or were there like posters?
They all had posters pretty much, but they had big tables, and then people would go to their tables to listen. Teachers would present.
So I can invite Tim Joint up to
Yeah.
maybe speak to what his plans are to be able to publicize and communicate.
Cool. And I think part 2 of my question that you're probably going to answer to is just how that's all being, shared, not only with the public, but with fellow teachers at a deeper level practice.
Yep, and so one of the things that we had talked about at the end of the school year was being able to kind of do this presentation both for the public and the board. So I actually have all of the posters, and we are still working on an exact date for when we could do, before a school board meeting, kind of a science fair presentation. We do need to continue to talk about what that looks like for additional teachers, but to be honest, one of the best things that I'm hoping to grow from this is a grassroots, like, hey, this was really powerful. I have a phone call with Dr. Beth Giles actually on Thursday to talk about, so what does next steps look like? We need to figure out, there's a little bit of friction between working with a particular district and the DPI and showing favoritism there. So we have to figure out what is a way that we can continue that type of relationship. So we're starting those conversations on Thursday, and then the goal is to teachers telling other teachers, like, hey, this is great. We talked about a second cohort model for teachers who went through the first cohort. What does that look like? Maybe we're all meeting at the same time, but there's a little bit of a differentiation for staff, and kind of trying to work through a various 3-4 year cohort model for our teachers to kind of grow outwards so we can spread that word.
Awesome.
Yep.
Look forward to the science fair. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for
So,
going, Pablo.
yeah.
I appreciate it.
Like I said, it was a day of professional development for me, so yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I'm bummed that I couldn't go to that. Okay, thank you. Board consent agenda, can I get a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
We are cruising along. Public comment number 3.
Amy Miller, 4458 North Larkin, or 1600 East Lake Bluff, whatever. Not there as much as I am typically during the school year. But I'm here today as the hat I have on is as the SEA president, and I've had colleagues reach out asking questions about facilities, and I had reached out to Dr. Davis too, and just am looking to carry forward some of the questions I've received, and those are specific to buildings, but then also more general. So the constant that I'm hearing is the fact that there are 52 educators here at SHS and 41 classroom spaces, and is that something that we're going to look into? And that's in flux. I know teachers have talked to Tim directly, but that keeps coming up. What are we doing to address that? The process of learning how to advocate for their own spaces, like, are things set? That's not clear. I know that the community forum happened, and so maybe there's been some changes, and maybe the district management team has made some changes, but the teachers themselves are wondering, like, what is that, where do we find ourselves in that feedback loop, and will it be at the start of the school year, and what will that look like? Because we do have an opportunity to make those plans, as you all are asking about. So just where do those who aren't directly impacted, like their classroom spaces haven't been identified, really, they could go to the website, but I'll be honest that they probably haven't. So what can we do in order to communicate that out? That's a question. And a hope that we can meet needs and answer those questions through that communication. So, Hillary, you talked about a communication committee. Are there any educators on that committee?
There are not. That's not, I think we have been deferring to Brian and his team to
Okay.
communicate with staff,
Okay.
but I think we can.
Well, you
Think
guys can
about
talk
that.
about it.
Yeah.
Think about
How
what-
we're internally communicating as well
Right.
as externally. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're, like you guys have said all night, we're at the beginning of this, so let's do it
Yep.
well.
Yep.
And yeah, that's it. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Brian, are you getting some of those questions as well? Are you and Amy talking about some of those in your meetings?
So we haven't really explicitly talked about that. I know the classroom numbers is something that staff had brought up. So I had gone around at the end of the school year just to update, provide, it was pre-design, the design phase or the very beginning of that, just to give staffs an idea of where we're headed.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's specifically followed up with the user groups, like, of those areas. So the plan right now is to be able to come back around with the user groups, and I think, and I'll touch base with Amy on this and other staff members. I think to be able to come back around sounds like maybe to the entire staffs as part of a staff meeting, to be able to give an update beyond just the people that were in the user group, because the user groups were people that were specifically affected by the renovated areas per se. And so maybe we can just provide a more general presentation that can be a little bit more of a question and answer, and then just, in written form, here's where we are in the process, because I think that's some of the questions also, is kind of what's our process for how we're making these decisions as we're moving forward. So.
Thank you. Okay, review of our to-do items.
All right, so I have just August 13th, making sure we get a budget update. So essentially, are we on track, and what's the status of the state budget as we look at that biennium budget coming up? And then to follow up just on facilities communications, just internally regarding staff, and probably communicating that also back to the communications committee.
Yep.
as another item for that group to be able to discuss.
Perfect. This goes to future agenda items as well, but I have the policy adoptions, facility policy review, and the push text and communications through Infinite Campus for our facilities work. And then you have the state budget info. Does that cover it? that was everything. Perfect. Well, then we are in recess.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.